While my husband Robert siphons money from our joint account to purchase a $12,000 diamond necklace for his secretary Jessica, I'm signing papers that will soon cut off his access to all our finances as executive vice president of the very bank where he thinks I process loan applications. As he casually transfers another $5,000 for their planned weekend to the Bahamas, I'm coordinating with our security team to build the most thorough financial infidelity case our bank has ever seen. He has absolutely no idea that his quiet little bank employee wife has been the head of financial security operations for the past 4 years. If you're watching this and have ever been underestimated, make sure you subscribe right now because we post new stories of justice and redemption every week. Also, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans the globe, and we love hearing from each one of you. The leather chair creaks softly as I lean back in my corner office, watching the transaction alert pop up on my phone. Another jewelry purchase, this time at Winston's, the exact store where Robert bought my engagement ring 7 years ago. Through my office window, I can see the upscale shopping district where he's currently browsing with Jessica, completely oblivious to the financial storm about to engulf him. The transaction amount makes me wince, $12,389. That's more than he spent on my wedding ring. Ms. Reynolds, are you certain you want to proceed today? Alan from our fraud department asks, his voice careful and professional as he places another document before me. His glasses reflect the afternoon sun streaming through my office windows, casting prisms across the stacks of evidence we've collected over the past 3 months. I appreciate his conscientiousness. It's why I recruited him from cybersecurity last year. Instead of answering immediately, I turn my phone toward him, displaying Robert's Instagram post from 10 minutes ago. Life's too short not to celebrate the special people in it. Blessed and grateful, living my best life. The photo shows a champagne flute beside an open jewelry box, his monogrammed cufflinks visible at the edge of the frame, the ones I gave him for our 5th anniversary. The timing couldn't be more perfect, I say, signing the document with deliberate strokes. My signature, Amanda Reynolds, flows across the paper with the same authority it carries on bank policy documents and executive directives. In both contexts, it signals consequential changes about to unfold. My phone vibrates with an incoming text from Robert. Working late tonight, babe. Big client presentation to prepare for. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you. I add this message to my meticulously organized digital folder, alongside dozens of similar texts from the past 4 months. Each one correlates precisely with restaurant reservations, hotel charges, or boutique purchases, all timestamps matching Jessica's increasingly lavish social media posts, where she coyly references her special someone who appreciates her worth. What Robert fails to realize is that I've been aware of his deception since the first unusual transaction 3 months ago. Every emergency meeting, every client dinner, every odd withdrawal from our joint savings, I've tracked and documented it all with the precision that made me the youngest EVP in our bank's history. Unlike the confrontational approach many might take, I haven't thrown his belongings onto the lawn or created dramatic scenes at his office. I haven't slashed tires or sent revealing photos to his parents. Instead, I've done what my professional training taught me. Follow the financial trail and build an airtight case. This document, Alan indicates, pointing to a particular section, will freeze all joint accounts and credit cards once executed. There's no reversing this action once initiated. His tone carries a note of caution. He's seen enough financial disagreements between couples to know how ugly they can become. I think about how Robert kissed my cheek this morning before leaving for work, promising we'd plan our anniversary trip to Greece next week. Meanwhile, I had already flagged the Bahamas resort reservation he'd made for himself and Jessica, $7,300. Charged to our joint credit card for this coming weekend, complete with couples massages and a private sunset cruise. Perfect. I say, my signature flowing across another document. That's exactly what needs to happen. My phone illuminates with a notification from Instagram. Jessica flaunting a distinctive blue jewelry box with the caption, "When someone truly values you, they show it." Blessed, feeling spoiled. I screenshot it immediately, noting the timestamp that aligns perfectly with the purchase alert from our joint credit card, the one Robert believes I never check because financial details stress you out unnecessarily, sweetheart. The irony would be comical if it weren't so insulting. Our forensic accounting team will begin their full audit on Monday morning, Alan explains, organizing the growing stack of executed documents. Based on the preliminary patterns of withdrawal and spending you've documented, they're likely to uncover even more than we already know. I have no doubt, I reply, pulling up a detailed spreadsheet on my tablet. Here's every questionable transaction from the past 6 months, cross-referenced with both their locations according to their phone GPS data. Alan's eyebrows rise as he reviews the meticulous documentation. This is remarkably comprehensive. Most people wouldn't have this level of detail. Most people don't spend their evenings alone while their husband claims to be at client dinners, I respond, unable to keep the edge from my voice. It gives one plenty of time to develop investigative skills, as if orchestrated to prove my point. My phone buzzes with a notification from our neighborhood group chat. Friends planning a community picnic this weekend. Robert's response appears immediately. Sorry, everyone. Out of town for a banking conference in Atlanta. Hate to miss it. I fight the urge to laugh out loud. The banking conference is actually a beachfront villa in Nassau. I've seen the confirmation, emails, the first-class airline tickets for 2, and the private dinner arrangements, all funded by our decade of shared savings. Final authorization, Alan says, sliding the last document across my desk. This will activate the fraud alert protocol that flags any attempted purchases over $100 on any of your joint accounts or credit cards. I don't hesitate. My signature cuts across the paper with decisive finality, channeling months of disappointment and betrayal into each pen stroke. A notification appears on my phone. Robert sharing a photo from what he claims is a client meeting preparation session. The unmistakable interior of Winston's jewelry section visible in the background. Let them enjoy their afternoon, I say, standing and smoothing my tailored blazer, the one Robert surprisingly complimented this morning, unaware that it's what I wear for the most serious executive meetings. By Monday morning, their celebration will have a very different flavor. Alan gathers the paperwork, his expression a mixture of professional detachment and unmistakable respect. In my 15 years handling financial security cases, I've rarely seen someone approach this situation with such strategic thinking, I suggest, picking up my leather portfolio. Or perhaps just the inevitable result of being consistently underestimated. Our preparation has been impeccable. Robert believes I work in loan processing, a deliberate misconception I've never corrected after he dismissed my initial promotion to department manager 4 years ago as pushing papers, but with a better title. He's never bothered to actually visit me at work or attend a single bank function, claiming those events were boring financial talk that wouldn't interest either of us. This convenient assumption allowed me to continue advancing through senior management without him paying the slightest attention. When my parents questioned why I didn't correct his misunderstanding, especially after my promotion to Executive Vice President of Security Operations last year, I simply told them the truth. He's never actually asked about my work, he just assumes. My father understood immediately. Having spent 40 years in banking himself, he recognized the value of observation over declaration. Monday morning will be illuminating for everyone involved. The following morning, I dress with particular care, charcoal gray suit, subtle pearl earrings, and the vintage watch my grandmother left me when she passed. The one that belonged to her mother, who was one of the first female bank managers in the state. The mirror reflects the professional image I've carefully cultivated at work, but that Robert has never truly seen. He still introduces me at his company events as his beautiful wife who works at the bank, as though I run a teller window rather than an entire division. If he bothered to look closer, he might have noticed the industry awards tucked discreetly on my home office shelf, or questioned why the bank president calls our home occasionally, or wondered why my salary quadrupled over the past 3 years. But Robert sees what he expects to see: a supportive wife whose career is secondary to his role as regional sales director at his technology firm. "Good morning, darling," I call out cheerfully as he shuffles into our kitchen, clearly tired from whatever late night he actually had, instead of the presentation preparation he claimed. Our premium coffee machine hums efficiently, filling our renovated kitchen with the aroma of the single-origin beans he insists are the only acceptable morning option. "I made you breakfast," I say, sliding a plate of his favorite avocado toast across the island.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
He kisses my cheek, the lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume mingling with his cologne. The same distinctive fragrance I noticed in Jessica's Instagram story yesterday, tagged "Office Vibes." "You're too good to me," he murmurs, immediately, checking his phone for messages. If you only knew, I think, watching him sip the coffee I prepared while simultaneously texting someone, his screen angled away from me as it has been for months. Last night, I sat at this very counter finalizing operation details with our bank's security team until well past midnight. "Another busy day ahead?" I ask casually, observing as he scrolls through his messages with slightly too much intensity. "The Wilson contract is driving me crazy," he sighs, running fingers through his expensively cut hair. "Might have to work through lunch again." The Wilson contract completed over a month ago. I know because Wilson's company banks with us, and their CFO mentioned the wrapped project during our quarterly business review 3 weeks ago. "Don't push yourself too hard," I say sympathetically, squeezing his shoulder. He doesn't notice me catching Jessica's name in his message notifications as his phone lights up again. After Robert leaves for work, or more likely, to coordinate the weekend getaway with Jessica, I transform our guest room into an operations center. Wedding photos come down from the walls, replaced with timeline charts, transaction records, and property ownership documents. My colleague Diane from the bank's legal team arrives with additional paperwork. "My God," she exclaims, examining the evidence wall. He really thought he could hide these transactions from someone who literally oversees financial security. He registered a separate email for transaction alerts, I explain, unable to suppress a bitter laugh. As if our systems wouldn't flag unusual spending patterns on joint accounts regardless of notification settings. That's literally what my department designed the algorithms to detect. Diane shakes her head, reviewing the documented timeline of financial infidelity. The arrogance is actually impressive. Did he really book a beachfront villa for this weekend using your anniversary travel fund? The same account we've been contributing to monthly for 6 years, I confirm, pulling up the transfer records. Apparently, Jessica deserves a luxury weekend more than our marriage deserves its promised celebration in Santorini. The more we review, the more the pattern becomes clear. Robert began small, with unexplained lunch charges slightly higher than normal, then progressed to client gifts that never appeared in his company expense reports, finally graduating to jewelry purchases and weekend getaways. The escalation matched Jessica's employment timeline perfectly, from new executive assistant to constant companion in less than a year. "Everything's in place for Monday," Diane confirms, checking her notes. "The forensic team is ready. The account restrictions activate first thing Monday morning, and the fraud investigation officially launches when the first transaction attempt is denied. But are you sure you don't want to confront him over the weekend? Give him a chance to explain?" I consider this briefly before shaking my head. He's had countless chances to be honest. Besides, I think it's more fitting that he discover the consequences while attempting to impress her with his financial generosity. By evening, final preparations are complete. My phone buzzes with one last message from Robert. Heading to the airport for Atlanta conference. Will call when I land. Don't forget to water the plants this weekend. Love you. I screenshot this final deception, noting that his location data shows him currently at Jessica's apartment, not the airport. The confirmation emails for tomorrow's Bahamas flights were printed and added to our evidence collection hours ago. Don't worry, Robert, I whispered to my empty house. The plants will be fine, and so will I. The weekend passes quietly as I prepare for Monday's reckoning. While Robert sends occasional texts with fabricated conference updates, even going so far as to download photos of Atlanta to share as his view, I finalized the last details with our bank's executive team. By Sunday evening, everyone is positioned for what will unfold. The bank president himself, having reviewed the evidence of financial misconduct involving one of his top executives' personal accounts, has authorized extraordinary measures. Monday. Morning arrives with perfect clarity. While Robert should be flying home from Atlanta, he and Jessica are actually scheduled on an afternoon flight from Nassau. I dress in my most authoritative outfit, the one reserved for board meetings and regulatory presentations. Today is not about being underestimated any longer. At precisely 2:15 p.m., I receive the alert I've been waiting for. Attempted credit card transaction at Nassau International Airport gift shop, 437s. $29, declined for fraud protection. Seconds later, another attempt at a lower amount, then another. I watch in real time as Robert's transaction attempts grow increasingly desperate and confused. The first call to our bank's customer service comes at 2:24 p.m. The representative, fully briefed on the situation, politely explains that his accounts have been flagged for suspicious activity and suggests he speak with a financial security specialist. When Robert demands immediate access to his funds, the call is transferred to Alan, who calmly informs him that the security hold requires in-person verification at his home branch. By the time Robert and Jessica land in our city at 7:45 p.m., they've been attempting to resolve the banking error for over 5 hours. Every credit card declined. Every attempt to transfer funds blocked. Their lavish weekend ended with borrowed cash from other passengers just to pay for airport coffee. I position myself in the bank president's office, where we've arranged for Robert to be directed when he inevitably storms into the main branch at 8:30 p.m., just before closing. Through the security monitors, I watch him arrive, disheveled, angry, still wearing his beach linen shirt, Jessica trailing behind him looking equally frustrated. I need to speak to whoever's in charge, he demands at the reception desk. There's been a serious error with my accounts. Of course, Mr. Reynolds. The evening manager responds with perfect professionalism. Our executive team is expecting you. Please follow me. The confusion on Robert's face is evident even through the security feed, as he's led not to a customer service desk, but to the executive elevator. Jessica attempts to join them, but is politely informed that only account holders can participate in security discussions. Her protests are diplomatically but firmly redirected to the waiting area. I straighten my posture and place the comprehensive evidence binder prominently on the conference table as the security feed shows Robert approaching. The bank president, Thomas Wilson, sits beside me, his presence underscoring the seriousness of the situation. When the door opens and Robert steps in, the momentary flash of confusion on his face quickly transforms into shock as he registers my presence at the head of the table. Amanda, what are you doing here? I'm trying to fix our accounts. They've frozen everything because of some fraud alert and... He stops abruptly, finally processing the executive office surroundings, the bank president's presence, and my position. At the head of the table. Hello, Robert, I say calmly. Please have a seat. We have some financial discrepancies to discuss. Financial. What's going on? Why are you here? His eyes dart between me and President Wilson, desperately, trying to understand the scenario unfolding before him. Mr. Reynolds, Thomas begins formally, I believe you've never actually been properly introduced to our Executive Vice President of Financial Security Operations, Amanda Reynolds. Robert stares at me, incomprehension written across his features. Executive Vice, what are you talking about? Amanda processes loan applications. Actually, I respond, opening the evidence binder, I haven't processed loan applications since my first promotion 6 years ago. I've held 4 positions since then, culminating in my current role overseeing all financial security operations for the bank's regional network. The color drains from Robert's face as realization begins to dawn. But you never said. You never asked, I reply simply. You just assumed, and I saw no reason to correct your assumption. Especially, once I began noticing unusual patterns in our joint accounts. I turned the binder toward him, revealing the first page, a timeline of transactions cross-referenced with his location data and Jessica's social media posts. Perhaps you'd like to explain this $7,300 charge to Royal Bahamas Resort? I ask, pointing to a highlighted entry. The one made the same day you told me you were attending a conference in Atlanta? Robert's expression cycles rapidly through shock, confusion, and the beginnings of panic. This is some kind of misunderstanding, he attempts, voice lacking conviction. I can explain. Please do, Thomas interjects, his tone making it clear that this meeting extends beyond marital concerns into professional territory. Because from a banking perspective, we're seeing patterns consistent with financial infidelity and misappropriation of shared assets. I calmly turn to the next page in the binder, revealing photos of Robert and Jessica entering jewelry stores, restaurants, and hotels, each paired with corresponding charges to our joint accounts. The dates, times, and amounts create an undeniable pattern of deception. This isn't just about our marriage, Robert, I explain, my professional tone firmly in place. When suspicious spending patterns appear in accounts belonging to bank executives, it triggers automatic security protocols. The same ones I helped design, ironically enough. Robert's expression hardens as his initial shock converts to defensiveness. You've been spying on me? Tracking my purchases? That's invasive and... That's banking security, Thomas corrects firmly. Mrs. Reynolds didn't need to track you specifically. Our systems automatically flag unusual spending patterns on any account in the network. The fact that these accounts happen to belong to our head of security simply meant the discrepancies were identified more quickly. Robert attempts another approach. Look, whatever you think is happening, this is between Amanda and me. It's a private matter that doesn't involve the bank. Unfortunately, I respond, sliding another document across the table. It does involve the bank when you attempt to use our joint savings, which includes my direct deposit from this institution, to fund activities that could be construed as fraudulent. The realization of his vulnerable position finally registers in Robert's expression. What happens now? He asks quietly, defiance fading into concern. Effective immediately, all joint accounts have been frozen pending full investigation. I explain professionally. Your personal accounts remain accessible, though with spending limits until we determine exactly how much marital asset redistribution has occurred. You can't just cut me off from our money, he protests, voice rising. Half of that is mine. Correct, I agree. Half is yours, which is why we've calculated exactly how much you've spent on non-marital expenses over the past 6 months. I slide another document toward him, a detailed accounting of every questionable transaction. This amount has been deducted from your portion. The remainder will be available to you once the formal separation of accounts is complete. Robert stares at the figure at the bottom of the page, a sum significant enough to make his eyes widen. This is insane. You can't possibly expect me to... Additionally, Thomas interjects. Given Mrs. Reynolds' position at this institution, we've taken the liberty of notifying our partner banks about the situation. As a security precaution, any new account applications under your name will require enhanced verification for the next 12 months. The full impact of his situation finally registers on Robert's face. Not only has his deception been discovered, but his financial options have been systematically and legally restricted by someone he's consistently underestimated throughout their relationship. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? He asks, genuine panic entering his voice. I imagine Jessica is still waiting downstairs, I respond coolly, though she might be reconsidering her weekend companion once she discovers his financial situation isn't quite what he portrayed. As if on cue, Robert's phone buzzes with a text. He checks it reflexively, then winces. Clearly, Jessica is growing impatient with the wait. One last thing, I say, standing to signal the meeting's conclusion. I've taken the liberty of packing your essential belongings. They're in Storage Unit 247 at Secure Space Storage on Maple Avenue. The access code is your birthday. I figured that would be easy for you to remember. I hand him a final envelope. Inside, you'll find the storage information, the name of a financial counselor who can help you establish a budget based on your actual income, and my attorney's contact information for when you're ready to discuss divorce proceedings. Robert stares at the envelope, the magnitude of his new reality finally sinking in. Amanda, please, we can talk about this. I made a mistake, but the time for talking was before you spent our anniversary fund on another woman? I interrupt calmly. The locks at home have been changed, and security has been notified not to allow you entry to our property. Any attempts to access the house will be treated as trespassing. Thomas stands, extending his hand formally to Robert. Mr. Reynolds, I believe we've concluded our business here. Security will escort you to the main entrance. As Robert is led from the room, looking shell-shocked and diminished, Thomas turns to me with professional respect. Amanda, take whatever time you need. Your team can handle operations this week. Thank you, Thomas, but I'll be in tomorrow as usual, I reply, gathering my materials. The financial security of our institution doesn't pause for personal matters. He nods appreciatively before leaving me alone in the conference room. Through the window, I watch Robert exit the building, still clutching the envelope, looking lost and confused as Jessica approaches him with visible irritation. I can't hear their conversation, but her expression tells me everything as he presumably explains their new financial reality. Let him struggle to make her understand how his access to funds has evaporated. Let him explain why their luxury weekend ended with borrowed cash and declined credit cards. Let him experience what happens when you underestimate someone simply because you never bothered to see them clearly. As I gather my belongings to leave, my phone buzzes with a notification. Robert attempting to use his personal credit card at a nearby hotel. The transaction flagged by our systems for manual approval given the new restrictions. I authorize it with a tap. He needs somewhere to sleep tonight after all. I'm not cruel, just finally done being underestimated. Walking to my car in the executive parking area, I feel strangely light, as though shedding years of accumulated dismissal and misconception. Tomorrow will bring paperwork, legal consultations, and the inevitable complications of untangling a shared life. But tonight, I drive home to a house that feels more like mine than ever before. Because sometimes the most powerful position isn't achieved through confrontation or drama, but through quiet competence and the strategic advantage of being constantly underestimated until the precise moment you choose to be seen. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button right now and join our community of supporters who believe in accountability and justice. We share new stories every week that will keep you coming back for more. Don't forget to leave a comment telling us your thoughts. Would you have handled this situation differently? Your engagement helps our channel grow, and we truly appreciate each one of you who takes the time to connect with us. The morning after confronting Robert at the bank, I wake to an unusual sensation. Silence. No sounds of his morning routine, no coffee machine humming, no news playing softly on his tablet. The absence of these familiar rhythms should feel jarring, but instead, I find myself breathing more deeply than I have in months. The bedroom that once felt like a stage for his daily performances of devotion now belongs entirely to me, a sanctuary rather than a shared compromise. My phone shows 17 missed calls from Robert, each one time-stamped in the progression of his panic. 9:47 p.m., likely after Jessica left him. 11:23 p.m., 12:05 a.m., and so on through the night in increasingly desperate intervals. The voicemails follow a predictable emotional arc, from indignation to bargaining to tearful pleas. I listen to each one methodically, cataloging them in a separate folder my attorney suggested I create for the divorce proceedings. Evidence of emotional manipulation can be useful in negotiating settlements, she explained during our preliminary consultation last week. The last message, left at 4:17 a.m., carries the ragged edges of a man finally grasping the magnitude of his new reality. Amanda, please, I don't understand how this happened. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I never thought you would. How could you have been the bank's executive all this time and never told me? I feel like I don't even know who you are anymore. Please call me back. We need to talk about this. About us. I'm at the Westbrook Hotel, room 342. Please. His confusion at my professional identity almost eclipses his remorse for the betrayal itself. A telling revelation of what truly shakes him. Not the loss of our marriage, but the shattering of his perception of me as someone he had accurately assessed and categorized. The cognitive dissonance of discovering I've been successful despite his dismissal seems more destabilizing to Robert than facing his own infidelity. I delete the notification banner without responding. My attorney was clear. No direct communication until legal parameters are established. All interactions should be documented and witnessed whenever possible. Robert's tendency toward charm and persuasion makes unmonitored conversations particularly inadvisable. The kitchen feels different this morning as I prepare a single cup of coffee. For years, I've automatically made two, his with precise measurements of cream and expensive Demerara sugar imported from Mauritius. Today, I use the delicate ceramic mug I love, but rarely used because Robert claimed it was impractically small. I add a generous splash of vanilla almond milk, another preference I've subconsciously suppressed because he once commented that it made the coffee taste like dessert. Small freedoms accumulate in unexpected ways. My phone chimes with a text from Diane. How are you holding up? Need anything? The simple kindness brings unexpected tears to my eyes. Throughout my marriage, friends gradually disappeared as Robert subtly dismissed them as too dramatic or not ambitious enough. Professional colleagues became my primary social circle, with Diane evolving from legal consultant to trusted confidant over years of shared projects and late-night crisis management sessions. I'm surprisingly okay, I respond honestly. Meeting with Catherine at 10:20 to discuss next steps. Catherine Mills, the divorce attorney recommended by 3 separate female executives at the bank, specializes in high-asset separations involving financial impropriety. Her reputation for thorough preparation and unflappable courtroom presence makes her particularly suited for cases where emotional manipulation might be deployed as a tactic. Diane's response comes quickly. She's brilliant. Let me know if you need company after, or wine, or both. The offer of support without pressure or judgment feels like a lifeline I didn't know I needed. As I prepare for the meeting, selecting a forest green suit that projects confidence without ostentation, another text arrives, this one from Alan. Insecurity. Attempted access to primary residence at 8:32 a.m. Subject advised of trespassing protocols and departed without incident. I exhale slowly, processing the information. Robert testing boundaries already, seeing if rules truly apply to him or if they're merely opening negotiations. "Thank you," I respond. "Please document for the file." Security footage of unauthorized access attempts will strengthen the case for a restraining order if his behavior escalates. After years of managing risk assessment for the bank, contingency planning has become second nature, a professional skill now deployed in my personal life with unsettling relevance. The drive to Catherine's office provides 20 minutes of relative peace, perhaps the only 20 minutes today when I won't be required to make decisions or explain my situation. Downtown traffic moves with its usual indifferent rhythm, neither accelerated nor slowed by the personal earthquakes occurring within the vehicles navigating its patterns. The normalcy feels both grounding and surreal, a reminder that collapse and continuity coexist in parallel regardless of individual circumstance. Catherine's office occupies the top floor of a restored historic building, its elegant architecture suggesting both tradition and resilience, qualities reflected in the attorney herself. At 62, Catherine Mills carries herself with the quiet confidence of someone who has seen every possible scenario unfold in matrimonial law and remains unshockable. Her handshake is firm, her office immaculate, her attention focused entirely on my case as if no other clients exist. "Amanda," she begins, once we're seated in her consultation room, "I've reviewed the preliminary documentation you sent over. Before we discuss specifics, I want to confirm your primary objectives for this dissolution." Her language is precise, devoid of the emotional overtones that often color discussions of divorce. This clinical approach feels reassuring, a complex situation reduced to manageable components. Financial separation with appropriate division of assets, accounting for his misappropriation of joint funds, I respond, matching her pragmatism. Protection of my professional standing and reputation, particularly within banking circles where his potential claims could damage credibility. And, I hesitate slightly, completion with minimal ongoing entanglement. We have no children, no shared businesses outside our joint accounts. A clean severance seems achievable. Catherine nods, making notes in her leather portfolio with a fountain pen. The kind of subtle luxury that suggests success without requiring acknowledgement. Based on the financial documentation you've provided, particularly the evidence of systematic diversion of joint assets for extramarital purposes, we're in an advantageous position. Florida is an equitable distribution state, not strictly community property, which gives judges considerable discretion in cases involving financial misconduct. For the next hour, we methodically dissect the marriage's financial architecture: joint, accounts, retirement funds, property holdings, investment portfolios. The clinical inventory of assets accumulated over 8 years together feels strangely impersonal, as if cataloging belongings from someone else's life. Catherine's occasional clarification questions reveal her meticulous attention to detail. The Vanguard account established in 2019, was that funded with inheritance monies or employment income? The downtown condo purchased before marriage, but refinanced during, who's listed on the current mortgage? Each question illuminates another strand in the complex web of entanglement that marriages become, regardless of intentions. "Now," Catherine says, closing one folder and opening another, "let's discuss the communications strategy. Based on your position at the bank and his demonstrated pattern of financial deception, we should anticipate potential reputational considerations. Has he made any statements, publicly or privately, suggesting he might attempt to characterize your professional actions as overreaching or inappropriate?" The question touches on my primary concern: that Robert, once he processes the initial shock, might attempt to reframe the situation as one where I abused my professional position to monitor his personal spending. The narrative of the vindictive wife weaponizing her corporate authority could potentially resonate, especially in banking circles hypersensitive to privacy concerns. Not explicitly, I respond carefully. However, during our confrontation at the bank, He did characterize the account monitoring as spying, rather than standard security protocols. Given his background in sales and his skill at controlling narratives, I believe he may attempt to position himself as the victim of institutional overreach. Catherine nods, unsurprised. We'll prepare for that contingency. I'd like to draft a formal statement establishing the chronology of events, emphasizing that all actions taken were standard banking security measures triggered by unusual spending patterns, not targeted surveillance. Having your bank's legal team review and endorse this statement would preemptively address any allegations of impropriety. Thomas has already offered the bank's full support, I confirm, referring to the bank president. The institution has a vested interest in establishing that all protocols followed standard operating procedures. Excellent, Catherine makes another note. Now, regarding immediate practical matters, the residential property, vehicle access, and personal belongings. You mentioned security measures are already in place at your primary residence. Yes, locks changed and security system recoded. His essential items were relocated to a storage facility, with access information provided. Our vehicles were purchased separately and remain individually titled. The Range Rover is his, the Audi is mine. And financial access? You've indicated joint accounts are frozen pending investigation? Correct. His personal accounts remain accessible but with transaction limits to prevent large transfers or withdrawals until we establish a formal separation agreement. His credit cards remain functional, but with reduced limits to prevent accumulation of new debts that might impact the marital estate. Catherine allows herself a small smile, rare in these initial consultations. You've approached this with exceptional foresight, Amanda. Most clients are still processing emotional shock during this phase, which often leads to strategic oversights. Risk management is quite literally my profession, I respond, returning her smile with a small one of my own. And truthfully, the emotional processing began months ago, when I first discovered the pattern of deception. By the time I confronted him, I'd already moved through several grief stages privately. That timeline will serve you well, Catherine observes. Now, let's discuss immediate next steps. I recommend filing the dissolution petition immediately, citing irretrievable breakdown with specific reference to financial misconduct. The sooner we establish court oversight, the more protection you'll have against potential retaliatory actions. The word retaliatory sends an unexpected chill through me. Despite everything, some part of me hasn't fully processed the transformation of Robert from husband to adversary, someone against whom I might need legal protection. Catherine notices my momentary hesitation. Standard precaution, she clarifies, gently. In high-asset separations involving professional reputation considerations, establishing legal parameters early creates clarity for both parties. My experience suggests that even previously non-confrontational spouses can become unpredictable when financial security and public perception are simultaneously threatened. We spend another hour reviewing documentation requirements, court timelines, and communication protocols. By the time I leave Catherine's office, I carry a comprehensive action plan with clearly delineated next steps and contingency provisions. The weight of uncertainty hasn't disappeared, but it's been substantially reduced by structural clarity, another parallel between my professional and now personal risk management approaches. Outside, the afternoon sun illuminates the city with deceptive warmth for early March. I check my phone to find 3 new voicemails from Robert, each one shorter than the last as his frustration at my non-response grows. The final one, only 8 seconds long, contains just his exasperated sigh and muttered, "This is ridiculous." I forward all 3 to my dedicated evidence folder without listening to their full content. Catherine's instructions were clear: catalog. But don't engage. My next appointment brings a different kind of challenge, meeting with Thomas and the bank's chief legal officer to formalize my temporary step back from directly overseeing financial security operations, while my personal accounts remain under investigation. Despite Thomas's assurances that this is purely procedural to maintain regulatory compliance, the professional separation stings unexpectedly. The bank has been my sanctuary, the place where my competence is recognized and valued without qualification. Temporary distance from this source of identity and purpose feels like losing a stabilizing force precisely when stability is most needed. The bank's downtown headquarters has always projected a particular kind of institutional permanence. Limestone facade, brass detailing, marble floors worn subtly smoother by decades of purposeful footsteps. Today, entering through the executive, entrance feels different, the familiar security rituals taking on new significance. The guards' respectful nods carry something additional. Not quite pity, but heightened awareness. News travels efficiently in banking circles, particularly when it involves executive personnel and unusual security protocols. Thomas meets me in the private elevator lobby, his typically formal demeanor softened slightly by genuine concern. "Amanda," he says, foregoing our usual professional greeting. "How are you holding up?" The question, though expected, momentarily disrupts my carefully maintained composure. Well-meaning inquiries about well-being often do. They require either transparent vulnerability or polite dishonesty, neither option particularly appealing in professional contexts. "I'm proceeding systematically," I respond, choosing precision over pretense. "Thank you for accommodating this meeting on short notice." Thomas nods, understanding the deflection without taking offense. We've worked together long enough to recognize each other's communication preferences, particularly in stress situations. Patricia is waiting in the conference room with the necessary documentation. We've structured this as a 60-day reassignment to special projects, maintaining your title and compensation while temporarily shifting direct security oversight to Alan. This preserves the integrity of the investigation without suggesting any diminishment of your position. The arrangement is as generous as regulatory requirements allow, a reflection of both my value to the institution and Thomas's personal respect. Still, the professional recalibration represents another loss of normalcy, another ripple effect of Robert's actions spreading beyond our marriage into my carefully constructed professional identity. Patricia Zhang, the bank's chief legal officer, greets me with professional warmth as we enter the conference room. "The paperwork is straightforward," she explains, sliding a modest stack of documents across the polished table. "Temporary reassignment to strategic initiatives, maintaining full executive privileges and compensation. Your team will report to Alan for day-to-day operations while continuing to copy you on all non-account-specific communications. We've emphasized the temporary nature of this arrangement in all internal messaging." I review the documents carefully, professional habit overriding the impulse to simply sign where indicated. The terms are indeed fair, perhaps even generous given the potential compliance complications. My signature flows across the designated lines with practiced efficiency, the same signature that appears on bank policies, executive directives, and most recently, divorce petitions. The convergence of professional and personal identities in this simple act feels momentarily disorienting. "Thank you both for handling this with such consideration," I say, returning the signed documents. To Patricia, "I appreciate the institution's support during this unexpected situation." "The bank values your leadership," Thomas responds simply. "This temporary adjustment protects both your professional standing and our compliance requirements. We anticipate your full return to security operations once the personal account investigations conclude." As the meeting ends and we exchange professional farewells, my phone vibrates with an incoming call. Robert again, now trying for the 12th time today. I silence it without looking at the screen, a gesture both Thomas and Patricia pretend not to notice, their discretion another small kindness in a day filled with procedural necessities. The walk to my office provides a momentary buffer between obligations. 23 steps from the conference room, right turn at the executive assistant cluster, 18 more steps to my door. The familiar route has been walked countless times, without conscious thought. But today I count each step deliberately, grounding myself in this small, predictable pattern amidst so much disruption. My office remains unchanged. City view through floor-to-ceiling windows, modernist desks selected for functionality rather than status signaling, carefully curated art featuring abstract landscapes in calming blues and greens. The space reflects my professional identity: organized, purposeful, attentive to detail without indulging in unnecessary ornamentation. For the next hour, I focus on transition documentation, preparing comprehensive briefing materials for Alan's temporary oversight of the department. A gentle knock interrupts my concentration. Diane stands in the doorway, her expression a careful blend of professional courtesy and personal concern. "Security flagged something you should know about," she says, closing the door behind her. "Robert attempted to access the executive floor 15 minutes ago. He was intercepted at security and escorted from the building without incident." The information lands with dull impact, not entirely unexpected, yet troubling in its confirmation of escalating boundary testing. Robert knows the bank's executive floor requires special clearance. His attempt to bypass security protocols suggests either irrational emotional reaction or deliberate provocation, neither scenario particularly reassuring. "Did he make any statements during the escort?" I ask, professional training automatically, seeking behavioral indicators for risk assessment. According to the incident report, he repeatedly stated he just needed 5 minutes with you to explain something important. When informed that unscheduled visits weren't permitted and suggested he could call to arrange a proper meeting, he became agitated and claimed it was ridiculous that he couldn't see his own wife at her workplace. The possessive framing, his own wife, reveals more than Robert likely intended about his perspective on our relationship. Not a partner with independent professional standing, but a possession with conditional access privileges determined by relational status. The language choice illuminates the underlying mindset that made my career advancement so easy to dismiss and ignore. "I've approved additional security presence in the executive lobby through the week," Diane continues. "Nothing obvious enough to create speculation, just an extra officer rotating through regular patrol patterns. Thomas also suggested we might want to adjust your parking access temporarily, perhaps using the secure basement entry rather than the executive garage. The suggestions are rational, proportional security adjustments rather than alarmist overreactions, yet they underscore how thoroughly Robert's actions have disrupted normal operational patterns. Not just our marriage, not just my home life, but my professional environment now requires recalibration because of his inability to respect boundaries." "Thank you," I say, grateful for Diane's matter-of-fact approach. "I'll use the basement. Access for the remainder of the week. Has Catherine's office been notified about the attempted entry?" "I've sent the incident report directly to her attention, as requested in your communication protocol document. She responded that this strengthens the case for the temporary restraining order included in your initial filing package." The systematic documentation and response procedures feel simultaneously reassuring and surreal. Professional crisis management protocols now deployed to navigate personal disruption. The boundary between work and home has dissolved completely. Professional and private identities merging under the pressure of circumstances neither domain was designed to accommodate alone. My phone screen illuminates with another notification, an email from the storage facility where Robert's belongings were relocated. The automated message indicates repeated failed access attempts with incorrect entry codes, followed by a customer service override request citing emergency needs. The predictable testing of each established boundary confirms Catherine's assessment of how the situation would likely progress. Systematic probing for points of vulnerability or flexibility, each denied access interpreted not as a firm boundary, but as a negotiation opening. "I should finish this transition documentation before the leadership meeting," I say, returning focus to the immediate task rather than spiraling into concern about Robert's increasingly erratic behavior. And Diane, thank you for everything. She acknowledges the gratitude with a simple nod before leaving, understanding that elaboration would require emotional bandwidth better reserved for the challenges still ahead today. This economy of emotional expression, this shared understanding that some things remain more manageable when not verbalized, these aspects of our professional relationship have become unexpected anchors during personal upheaval. The remainder of the afternoon unfolds in a carefully managed sequence of professional obligations. Transition documentation completed, leadership team briefed on temporary reporting structure changes, ongoing projects prioritized for continued momentum during my partial reassignment. Each task accomplished provides a small sense of control amidst circumstances where personal agency feels increasingly constrained by others' actions and reactions. At 5:37 p.m., as I prepare to leave through the newly designated secure basement exit, a final notification appears, an email from Robert sent to both my personal and professional addresses. The subject line alone, "What you need to know before making irreversible decisions," suggests the emotional escalation Catherine predicted would follow initial shock and disbelief. The all-caps formatting, so unlike Robert's usually meticulous communication style, indicates emotional dysregulation overriding his normal self-presentation concerns. Following Catherine's protocol, I forward the email unread to my legal documentation folder, adding it to the growing catalog of communication attempts that will inform the court's understanding of our situation. The impulse to open it, to see what Robert considers important enough to warrant such urgent framing, creates momentary internal conflict. Professional training emphasizes information collection for comprehensive assessment. Legal advice prioritizes communication boundaries to prevent manipulation and misrepresentation. In this instance, legal guidance overrides professional instinct. The drive home follows an unfamiliar route, another security adjustment recommended by the bank's protection team. 30 minutes longer than my usual commute, the alternative path avoids predictable patterns that might enable unplanned coincidental encounters. The additional travel time creates an unexpected transition space, a buffer between professional management of the situation and the more vulnerable experience of returning to a home now altered by absence. As I approach my neighborhood, evidence of Robert's increasing desperation becomes immediately apparent. His Range Rover is parked 3 houses down from our property, just far enough away to technically comply with property access restrictions, while still establishing visible presence in the neighborhood. The psychological tactic is transparent, demonstrating physical proximity despite legal boundaries, creating uncomfortable awareness of potential observation. Rather than proceeding home, I circle the block and park at Sarah's house 2 streets over. Sarah, my neighbor from before the marriage, has offered her guest house as a temporary sanctuary if needed. Another unexpected kindness emerging from a situation that reveals both disappointment and support in equal measure. A quick text exchange confirms she's home, and the offer stands. "He's parked down the street watching the house," I explain as she welcomes me into her kitchen. The familiar space unchanged since our regular Friday wine nights years ago, before Robert gradually redefined such gatherings as taking you away from more important things. "I saw him arrive about 2 hours ago," Sarah confirms, pouring tea without asking if I want some, a small remembered preference from our closer days. "He's gotten out a few times to pace, then returns to the car when neighbors walk by. Classic intimidation by presence without technical violation." Sarah's matter-of-fact assessment reflects her professional background in victim advocacy, a career Robert once dismissed as emotionally draining charity work, despite its requiring more advanced degrees than his own business position. Her trained eye recognizes the behavioral patterns I'm experiencing with clinical precision. "Catherine says this escalation pattern is predictable," I explain, accepting the tea gratefully. "Initial shock, then bargaining, then intimidation attempts when previous approaches fail. The restraining order hearing is scheduled for Thursday morning. Until then, she's advised minimizing potential contact scenarios. The guest house is yours for as long as needed, Sarah offers simply. It's fully stocked, entirely private, and has separate street access from the main house. He'd have no way of knowing you're here rather than traveling or staying at a hotel. The offer represents exactly the solution needed: proximity to home without vulnerability to confrontation, independence without isolation, security without institutional formality. The guest house, a converted carriage house behind Sarah's Victorian main residence, provides both practical accommodation and symbolic refuge, a return to connections that existed before Robert's influence began reshaping my personal landscape. Just for tonight, I say, not entirely convinced by my own limitation. I have clothing and essentials in the car. Tomorrow I'll arrange for security accompaniment to retrieve additional items from the house. Within an hour, I'm settled in. The guest house's comfortable simplicity, space organized for function without excessive ornamentation, much like my office. Sarah provides dinner without intrusive conversation. Understanding intuitively that emotional processing requires energy currently allocated to practical considerations. The evening passes in quiet productivity. Emails addressed, documents organized, contingency plans refined. Professional functioning continues even as personal foundations shift. At 11:42 p.m., a final notification for the day arrives, a voicemail from a number I don't immediately recognize. The unfamiliar area code triggers momentary security concerns until the message plays. Jessica's voice, unexpectedly subdued rather than confrontational. "Amanda, this is Jessica Matthews. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from right now, but there are things you should know about what Robert has been saying. About you, about the situation, about everything really. I'm not asking for forgiveness or anything like that, but if you're willing to talk, I think it might help you prepare for what's coming. My number is 812-555-7643. The message creates immediate conflicting reactions. Professional interest in potential intelligence about Robert's current state of mind versus legal caution about engaging with someone potentially hostile to my interests. Catherine's guidance on unexpected communications was clear. Document, but do not respond without consultation. I forward the voicemail to both Catherine and my evidence folder, adding it to tomorrow's discussion agenda. As midnight approaches, the guest house offers quiet refuge from a day filled with procedural necessities and emotional undercurrents. Tomorrow brings more challenges: the formal filing of divorce papers, the restraining order hearing preparation, the strategic planning for public narrative management once legal proceedings become visible in professional circles. Each aspect requires careful attention. Each decision carries potential long-term implications. For now, however, the day's obligations have been met with as much clarity and purpose as circumstances allow. The professional competence that Robert consistently underestimated has become the framework supporting navigation through the dissolution he never anticipated. Tomorrow's challenges will be addressed with the same methodical approach that has guided both banking risk management and personal crisis response: assessment, analysis, strategic action, and continuous adaptation as new information emerges. The final conscious thought before sleep arrives carries unexpected peace. This dissolution, though neither chosen nor welcomed, reveals strength previously untested and resilience previously theoretical. The banking executive Robert never bothered to see is precisely the person equipped to navigate the ending he never thought to fear. Thursday morning arrives with unexpected clarity after a night of fitful sleep. The restraining order hearing is scheduled for 9:30 a.m., and my body seems to understand the gravity of the day even before my conscious mind fully engages. I shower with methodical precision, selecting a navy suit that projects authority without ostentation. Conservative enough for court, yet appropriate for the executive meeting scheduled afterward. Every decision this morning feels weighted with Additional significance, as if the cumulative choices will somehow influence the day's outcome. Catherine's instructions were clear. Arrive at the courthouse 30 minutes early, enter through the south entrance where security is typically less congested, and proceed directly to Conference Room B, where we'll review final documentation before the hearing. The systematic approach to even these logistical details provides a framework that keeps emotional turbulence contained, a small mercy during a process designed to dismantle a shared life through legal procedure. The drive downtown follows the alternative route established earlier this week, another adaptation to Robert's increasingly unpredictable behavior. Yesterday, he appeared at the bank again, this time in the public lobby rather than attempting executive access, creating a scene that required security intervention when he refused to leave without seeing me. The incident report described him as agitated but not overtly threatening, a clinical assessment that fails to capture the emotional complexity of having someone who once shared your bed now categorized as a security concern. The courthouse. Parking garage offers anonymous efficiency. Just another vehicle among dozens, my presence unremarkable among the daily parade of legal proceedings that process human conflict into documented resolutions. The concrete stairwell echoes with my footsteps as I choose stairs over elevator, another security protocol recommendation to minimize predictable movement patterns. Such precautions would have seemed absurdly paranoid just weeks ago. Now they feel like necessary adaptations to a reality where familiar relationships have transformed into potential threats. Catherine stands waiting in Conference Room B, her tailored suit and perfect posture projecting the calm competence that made her reputation in matrimonial law. She's arranged the documents in precise stacks across the conference table, each labeled with color-coded tabs indicating different aspects of our case: financial evidence, communication records, security incident reports. The visual organization of complex emotional chaos into manageable components feels reassuring. A reminder that even the messiest human situations can be cataloged, assessed, and addressed systematically. "Good morning, Amanda," she greets me, with professional warmth. "How are you feeling today?" The question seems simultaneously routine and profound, a social nicety that nonetheless invites honest assessment of my emotional state before entering proceedings that require strategic clarity. "Focused," I respond after brief consideration, and perhaps surprisingly calm. Catherine nods approvingly. "That's ideal. Judge Hernandez appreciates composed presentation. Emotional displays, while understandable, can sometimes distract from factual assessment." Our objective today is straightforward: demonstrate the pattern of behavior that necessitates legal boundaries through clear documentation rather than emotional appeals. We spend the next 20 minutes reviewing key evidence points and anticipated counter-arguments. Robert's attorney filed a response yesterday afternoon, characterizing the restraining order request as punitive overreach designed to further financial leverage rather than addressing genuine safety concerns. The framing attempts to reposition Robert as victim rather than aggressor, suggesting my actions stem from vindictiveness rather than legitimate security considerations. This approach is entirely predictable, Catherine says, highlighting relevant sections of the response filing. His counsel is attempting to establish a narrative of emotional persecution that will potentially support later claims regarding financial asset division. We'll counter with the documented pattern of escalation, from initial contact attempts to physical presence at protected locations to confrontational public incidents. The progression clearly indicates boundary testing rather than good faith communication efforts. At precisely 9:15, a court officer appears to escort us to the hearing room. The courthouse corridors buzz with subdued activity, attorneys conferring in hushed tones, clients waiting with tense expressions, court personnel moving with practiced efficiency between chambers and hearing rooms. The institutional nature of the setting creates strange emotional distance. My personal upheaval is just another case number in today's proceedings, unremarkable in a system designed to process thousands of similar dissolutions annually. Courtroom 4B is smaller than television dramas suggest, its wooden benches worn smooth by years of anxious waiting. Catherine guides me to the appropriate seating area, positioning herself slightly in front. A subtle physical boundary between me and whatever might unfold. We've been seated less than 3 minutes when Robert enters with his attorney, Martin Graves, a man whose reputation for aggressive divorce litigation precedes him. The strategic choice of counsel itself reveals something about Robert's approach to our dissolution. He's selected representation known for confrontational tactics rather than equitable resolution facilitation. Robert's appearance startles me slightly. Just days since our confrontation at the bank, he looks noticeably different, unshaven, his normally immaculate clothing showing signs of careless treatment. The physical manifestation of his emotional state creates an unexpected pang of something complex, not quite sympathy, but recognition of the human impact beneath the legal proceedings. He attempts eye contact immediately, his expression cycling rapidly between indignation and appeal. Catherine positioned herself precisely to interrupt. This visual connection, another thoughtful protection I hadn't anticipated needing. Judge Hernandez enters promptly at 9:30, her efficiency immediately evident in how she reviews the case briefing while simultaneously establishing courtroom expectations. At 60, with 23 years on the bench, her reputation for cutting through emotional manipulation to focus on factual evidence made her assignment to our case particularly advantageous. We're here regarding case number 2025-DR 4872, Reynolds v. Reynolds, petition for temporary restraining order pending dissolution proceedings, she states, looking up from the file. I've reviewed the initial filing and response. Before hearing arguments, I want to clarify that this court's interest is solely determining whether a pattern of behavior exists that warrants legal intervention for safety purposes. Financial matters and dissolution terms will be addressed in separate proceedings. Is that understood by all parties? Both attorneys confirm understanding, though Robert shifts visibly in his seat, a physical tell suggesting discomfort with the hearing's limited scope. His strategy likely involved connecting the restraining order request to financial motives, a narrative Judge Hernandez has preemptively constrained. Catherine presents our case with methodical precision, walking through the documented timeline of escalation without emotional embellishment. The evidence speaks clearly. 17 phone calls in one night after initial confrontation, unauthorized residence approach after being explicitly informed of trespassing consequences, workplace disturbance requiring security intervention, extended, vehicle surveillance of the residential property, multiple attempts to access secured storage containing his belongings with incorrect codes, followed by demanding emergency access override. Your Honor, this pattern clearly demonstrates an inability to respect explicitly communicated boundaries, Catherine concludes. Each incident individually might seem minor, but collectively they establish escalating behavior that creates reasonable concern about potential confrontation. We're not alleging threats of physical harm, but rather a concerning pattern of boundary testing that necessitates legal clarification of appropriate contact parameters. Martin Graves approaches the restraining order from an entirely different angle, focusing on emotional rather than factual elements. Your Honor, we're witnessing the weaponization of legal processes to punish Mr. Reynolds for marital indiscretions. My client acknowledges poor judgment regarding financial matters and personal relationships, but these attempts to contact his wife represent normal communication efforts during a difficult marital transition, not harassment or threatening behavior. Judge Hernandez interrupts his narrative before it fully develops. Counselor, I'm not seeing evidence in your response filing that counters the documented incidents. Are you disputing that these events occurred as described? The redirection forces Graves to address factual elements rather than emotional framing. We don't dispute the contacts themselves, Your Honor, but rather the characterization of intent behind them. Mr. Reynolds was attempting to discuss the sudden freezing of joint financial accounts without prior notice, a situation that left him temporarily without access to living expenses. His approaches to the residence were to retrieve essential belongings, not to create intimidation. Were arrangements for essential belongings not already established? Judge Hernandez asks, reviewing the documentation. According to this filing, a storage unit containing necessary items was arranged with access information provided. The access code provided was incorrect, Graves attempts. It was the client's birth date as specified in communications, Catherine counters immediately. Security logs show multiple attempts with various combinations rather than the provided code, suggesting deliberate testing rather than good faith access attempts. The technical detail creates visible frustration for Robert, whose expression tightens noticeably. The systematic documentation of each incident leaves little room for reinterpretation, another benefit of approaching emotional chaos through structured risk management protocols. After 40 minutes of presentation and questioning, Judge Hernandez makes her determination without leaving the bench, a positive sign according to Catherine's earlier briefing. Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting the temporary restraining order for a period of 60 days. Mr. Reynolds is to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from Mrs. Reynolds' residence and workplace, with no direct contact through any medium including phone, email, social media, or third-party messengers. Any communication must be conducted exclusively through legal counsel. Regarding financial matters, those will be addressed through appropriate dissolution proceedings, rather than direct contact attempts. She turns her attention directly to Robert, her expression firm but not unkind. Mr. Reynolds, I want to be very clear that violation of this order has serious legal consequences regardless of intent. If you have concerns about financial access or personal property, those must be addressed through your attorney. Do you understand these terms? Robert's affirmative response comes through clenched jaw, his body language communicating the defiance his verbal compliance attempts to mask. The restraining order represents another concrete boundary he can no longer ignore or reinterpret. Legal parameters replacing the social and relational expectations he's consistently disregarded. As we exit the courtroom, Catherine maintains her position slightly between Robert and me, a subtle physical barrier that prevents direct approach. His attorney engages him in immediate consultation, likely advising against any impulsive reactions that might strengthen the case for extending the restraining order beyond 60 days. The courthouse corridor provides enough space for separate paths toward different exits, maintaining the newly established legal distance. A straightforward outcome, Catherine observes as we reach the parking structure. Judge Hernandez recognized the pattern immediately. The 60-day time frame gives us room to pursue the dissolution proceedings with appropriate separation and can be extended if boundary testing continues. The legal victory feels simultaneously significant and strangely hollow. Necessary protection secured through a process that reduces complex emotional entanglement to documented incidents and judicial orders. The restraining order represents both professional effectiveness and personal failure. Protection required because a relationship once built on trust has devolved into potential threat. My phone vibrates with a meeting reminder. The executive. Briefing at the bank scheduled for 11:30 a.m. to discuss my temporary reassignment and department transition plan. The immediate pivot from divorce proceedings to professional obligations creates cognitive dissonance. Two significant life domains colliding in a single morning with barely time to process the emotional implications of either. The bank headquarters appears unchanged from yesterday, its limestone facade projecting institutional permanence regardless of personal upheaval. The security team greets me with professional courtesy as I enter through the designated secure entrance, their awareness of the restraining order proceedings evident in slightly heightened attentiveness, without explicit acknowledgement. Thomas meets me at the private elevator, his expression carefully neutral. The restraining order was granted, he confirms quietly as we ascend to the executive floor. 60 days with standard non-contact provisions, I respond, matching his professional. Judge Hernandez was thorough but efficient. He nods, satisfied with the outcome without requiring emotional elaboration. The transition briefing is prepared. Alan has comprehensive documentation regarding current security protocols and incident response procedures. Patricia wants a private. Word before the general meeting. Something about potential public relations considerations. The executive floor hums with normal activity. Assistants coordinating schedules, department heads conferring about quarterly projections. The familiar rhythm of institutional functioning continuing regardless of personal circumstances. My office remains unchanged. City views framed by floor-to-ceiling windows. Documents arranged in precise stacks awaiting attention. The professional space provides momentary refuge from emotional complexity. Here, competence remains the primary currency, effectiveness the consistent measure of value. Patricia Zhang, our chief legal officer, arrives precisely at 11:15 as scheduled, her characteristic efficiency evident in both timing and preparation. She carries a slim portfolio containing what appears to be media monitoring reports based on the visible tab labels. Amanda, she begins once seated. Before the department transition meeting, we should discuss potential public narrative management. Martin Graves has something of a reputation for strategic media leaks during high-profile divorces, particularly when his client has reputational vulnerabilities. The observation touches on concerns I've considered, but not fully articulated. How Robert might attempt to reframe our situation publicly if legal proceedings don't favor his position. His career in technology sales relies heavily on reputation and relationship management. Damage to his professional image creates significant financial implications beyond our divorce settlement. What specifically are we anticipating? I ask. Professional assessment overriding personal concern. Based on his response filing approach, likely a narrative suggesting corporate power abuse, private banking information leveraged against a spouse during marital difficulties. It's a sympathetic angle that resonates particularly well in current discussions about digital privacy and institutional oversight. We've prepared counter-messaging emphasizing standard security protocols and regulatory compliance, but wanted your awareness of potential public dimensions. The calculated strategic approach Robert might deploy creates another layer of complexity. From husband to adversary to potential public relations threat, each transformation requiring additional adaptation and response preparation. The personal relationship has now fully collapsed into risk assessment and damage mitigation, emotions secondary to strategic positioning. I appreciate the foresight, I respond. Professional training providing appropriate language when emotional reaction seems inadequate. Catherine mentioned similar concerns about narrative framing. She's prepared documentation emphasizing standard security protocols rather than targeted surveillance. Perfect alignment. Patricia nods approvingly. We'll coordinate terminology and response parameters between legal teams to ensure consistent messaging, regardless of where potential media inquiries might be directed. The conversation transitions seamlessly to the upcoming department transition meeting, reviewing communication. Points regarding my temporary reassignment to strategic initiatives while Alan oversees daily security operations. The professional efficiency feels simultaneously reassuring and disorienting. Complex emotional reality reduced to communication strategy and operational continuity planning. Personal upheaval addressed through institutional risk management frameworks. The transition meeting itself proceeds with minimal deviation from standard protocols. Department heads receive briefing materials outlining temporary reporting structure changes. Alan presents his interim security operations plan. I maintain appropriate professional composure throughout. The institutional machinery adapts to personal circumstance through procedural adjustment rather than emotional accommodation. Another strange comfort in its predictable functioning regardless of individual disruption. By early afternoon, professional obligations temporarily fulfilled, I face the practical reality of returning to a home Robert is now legally prohibited from approaching. The restraining order creates physical safety, but no corresponding emotional security. The house remains filled with remnants of shared history, now recontextualized through deception and dissolution. The drive home follows yet another alternative route, security protocols now habitual rather than conscious decisions. Residential streets appear peaceful in afternoon sunlight, neighbors' lives continuing in apparent normalcy while mine undergoes fundamental reconfiguration. The contrast between external continuity and internal disruption creates cognitive dissonance, significant personal upheaval rendered invisible within unchanged physical environments. Sarah's message awaits when I arrive home. Saw the court? Records were updated. Restraining order granted? Guest house remains available if needed. Her consistent support without intrusive questioning provides exactly the right balance of connection and space. Recognition of difficulty without demanding. Emotional processing before I'm prepared to offer it. Order granted for 60 days. I confirm via text. Returning home today, but appreciate the ongoing option. The guest house remains a valuable contingency, another strategic alternative if residential security proves emotionally or practically challenging despite legal protections. Entering the house feels strangely significant, as if the restraining order somehow transformed shared space into something new requiring reacclimation. I move through rooms methodically, noting Robert's lingering presence in abandoned magazines, forgotten charging cables, the particular arrangement of kitchen implements reflecting his organizational preferences. The physical remnants of his daily existence remain despite his legal exclusion, objects rendered suddenly complicated by changed relationship status. Catherine recommended professional assistance for personal property division, suggesting a specialized service that inventories, photographs, and separates belongings with appropriate documentation to prevent later disputes. The clinical approach to dismantling shared life feels simultaneously depressing and necessary. Emotional detachment required for effective practical resolution. My phone interrupts this inventory with a notification, an email from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, "Important information regarding Robert Reynolds." Security training immediately identifies potential phishing characteristics, but closer examination shows message routing through a law firm's secure server. Still, caution dictates forwarding to Catherine before opening, potential information value balanced against security protocols. Her response comes quickly. Reviewed and cleared message. Appears to be from Jessica Matthews via her personal attorney. Recommend review, but no direct response without consultation. The email content proves unexpectedly substantive. Jessica. Providing detailed documentation of Robert's communications about me, our financial situation, and his plans for responding to the divorce filing. Screenshots of text messages reveal concerning language. Amanda has no idea what's coming once I talk to some reporter friends about how the banking industry handles private customer information. And she thinks she's so clever with her executive position, but let's see how clever she looks when everyone knows she used banking systems to spy on her husband. The explicit threat of reputational damage confirms Patricia's earlier concerns about narrative weaponization. Jessica's motivation for sharing this information remains unclear, perhaps attempting damage control for her own reputation, possibly seeking some form of reconciliation advantage, or simply recognizing the potential liability of involvement in Robert's retaliatory planning. I forward the complete communication to both Catherine and Patricia with identical message. Potential evidence of premeditated reputation damage attempt. Appears credible based on message routing and content specificity. Advise on appropriate response approach. Their responses reflect their respective professional domains. Catherine focuses on legal leverage implications, Patricia on institutional protection strategies. Both agree that direct engagement with Jessica presents more risk than potential benefit, regardless of her apparent cooperation. Instead, The information provides valuable preparation for counteracting narrative strategies potentially already in development. Evening arrives with unusual quietness. No expected return of another person, no accommodations required for someone else's preferences or schedule, no performance of partnership. The restraining order creates physical separation currently reinforced by legal consequence, yet emotional disentanglement follows no similarly structured process. Memories and associations remain embedded in shared spaces, triggered by ordinary objects now complicated by changed context. I prepare dinner for one with mechanical efficiency, the process highlighting how thoroughly daily habits incorporate another's presence even when physically absent. 2 wine glasses automatically retrieved before consciously returning one to the cabinet. Cooking portions calibrated for 2 without conscious thought. Small adjustments required for recalibrating life, scaled for partnership back to individual. Functioning. My phone interrupts this mechanical routine with an unexpected call. Thomas, outside normal business hours, his timing suggesting particular significance. Amanda, apologies for the evening contact, he begins once I answer. We've received a media inquiry that warrants immediate attention. A reporter from the Financial Times is preparing a story suggesting potential privacy violations in banking. Security operations, specifically referencing monitoring of spouse accounts by security personnel. The timing confirms Jessica's information about Robert's retaliatory strategy, barely hours after the restraining order. Media narrative weaponization already deployed. The speed suggests preparation preceding the court hearing, retribution planned regardless of legal outcome. The inquiry doesn't name you specifically, Thomas continues, but references a high-ranking security executive at a major regional bank, with enough specific details to create obvious connection. Patricia has prepared response statements emphasizing regulatory compliance and standard security protocols. We wanted your awareness before implementing the communication strategy we discussed this morning. The calculated attack targets precisely what Robert correctly identified as most valuable: professional reputation and institutional credibility. Not physical assets or financial accounts, but the professional identity I've carefully constructed through years of consistent competence and ethical practice. The approach reveals how thoroughly he understands where significant damage might be inflicted, even while consistently dismissing my professional accomplishments. I appreciate the immediate notification, I respond. Professional training providing structure when emotional reaction feels overwhelming. Has legal reviewed the specific inquiry language for potential defamation concerns? Patricia's team is conducting that assessment now, Thomas confirms. Initial review suggests careful phrasing to imply impropriety without making directly actionable claims. The reporter has requested comment by noon tomorrow, suggesting publication timeline of late Friday for maximum weekend news cycle impact. The strategic timing reveals media sophistication beyond Robert's typical operational approach, suggesting professional consultation in crafting this retaliatory response. The Friday publication target maximizes potential damage through weekend. Social media amplification while minimizing opportunity for immediate professional counter-response when offices close. I'll come in early tomorrow to review response strategy with the communications team, I offer, already mentally rearranging tomorrow's schedule to accommodate this unexpected crisis management requirement. Has Catherine been notified about this development? Patricia contacted her directly given the potential legal implications for both personal and institutional reputation. They're coordinating response approaches to ensure consistent messaging regardless of inquiry direction. The cooperation between personal and institutional legal counsel provides some reassurance. Coordinated response strategy likely more effective than fragmented reaction across different domains. Still, the rapid escalation from private dissolution to public narrative battle creates significant new complications in an already complex situation. After ending the call with appropriate appreciation for the immediate notification, I stand, motionless in the kitchen, partially prepared meal forgotten as implications cascade through conscious awareness. The restraining order provides physical separation, but no protection against reputational warfare. Legal boundaries prevent direct contact, but not strategic media manipulation. The dissolution process has expanded beyond personal relationship, termination into potential professional credential undermining. This recognition triggers something unexpected, not fear or anxiety, but a particular form of clarity that emerges in crisis situations. The strategic approach that informed security operations planning now applies to personal reputation defense, professional frameworks providing structure for navigating emotional complexity. Robert's attack targets professional credibility precisely because he recognizes its fundamental importance. The challenge now requires deploying that same professional competence toward effective counter-response. I send brief updates to both Catherine and Patricia, confirming awareness of the media inquiry and availability for early strategy coordination tomorrow. Their responses arrive almost simultaneously, suggesting ongoing communication between them. Another reassuring indication of coordinated approach rather than fragmented reaction. Sleep seems unlikely given the circumstances, so I redirect mental energy toward preparation, reviewing relevant bank security protocols, documenting timeline of account monitoring triggers, identifying regulatory compliance standards applicable to unusual transaction flags. The process feels simultaneously defensive and empowering, assembling factual foundation to counter narrative manipulation, professional competence deployed against personal attack. Around midnight, unexpected clarity emerges regarding Jessica's information sharing motivation. If Robert proceeds with media narrative claiming inappropriate account monitoring, Jessica potentially becomes collateral damage. Her participation in financial impropriety publicly documented through bank records that would inevitably be referenced. In response statements. Her preemptive information sharing likely represents self-protection rather than genuine assistance, an attempt to position herself as cooperative rather than complicit before public exposure becomes inevitable. This realization triggers reconsideration of potential response strategies. If Jessica's primary concern involves protecting her own reputation rather than assisting Robert's, additional documentation from her might prove valuable in establishing comprehensive timeline of events. Catherine previously advised against direct contact, but changed circumstances might warrant reconsideration of that guidance with appropriate legal intermediation. I draft a message to Catherine outlining this updated assessment and potential strategic implications, careful to frame the approach as consideration rather than decided action. Maintaining disciplined communication through legal counsel remains essential despite temptation toward direct engagement during crisis escalation. Morning arrives after minimal sleep, the media inquiry creating continuous assessment cycles that resist normal rest patterns. I prepare for the day with mechanical efficiency, selecting the gray suit reserved for particularly challenging negotiations. Another small control element in circumstances increasingly characterized by external disruption. The bank's communication team has assembled by 7:30 a.m., their early arrival indicating appropriate recognition of situation significance. Patricia leads the strategy session with characteristic thoroughness, addressing both factual response components and narrative positioning considerations. The inquiry contains 3 specific allegations we need to address, she explains, distributing carefully prepared briefing documents. First, suggestion that banking security protocols were manipulated for personal purposes. Second, implication that customer privacy was compromised through inappropriate access. Third, insinuation that marital disputes influenced institutional financial decisions. The allegations demonstrate sophisticated understanding of potential regulatory concerns, likely shaped by legal counsel familiar with banking compliance vulnerabilities. Each suggestion targets specific areas where perceived impropriety creates maximum reputational damage, potential regardless of factual accuracy. Our response strategy addresses each allegation with documented process verification. Patricia continues. Security protocols followed standard escalation procedures triggered by unusual transaction patterns, fully documented through automated flagging systems rather than manual intervention. Account access remained within regulatory compliance, parameters with appropriate recusal from direct decision authority once personal connection was identified. Financial restrictions implemented followed standard fraud prevention protocols applicable to any accounts, showing similar activity patterns. The factual response elements appear comprehensive, each allegation countered with documented procedural compliance rather than defensive justification. The approach leverages institutional credibility against individual accusation, banking regulatory framework, providing structure for responding to personalized attack. Additionally, Thomas adds, joining the strategy session, we've prepared background briefing materials outlining our security division's internationally recognized compliance standards and independent audit certifications. These materials don't directly address specific allegations, but establish contextual foundation demonstrating institutional commitment to ethical practice and regulatory adherence. The comprehensive approach reflects institutional recognition that attacks against executive reputation constitute indirect attacks against organizational credibility. Personal and professional domains have become inextricably connected through Robert's strategic approach. Dissolution conflict expanded into potential regulatory concern requiring coordinated response. Catherine arrives midway through the strategy session, her presence reflecting the unusual intersection of personal legal proceedings and institutional reputation management. Her contribution focuses primarily on potential future developments rather than immediate response strategy. Based on initial filing approaches and this media escalation, we should anticipate potential regulatory complaints as logical next steps, she observes after reviewing the response materials. The narrative framework being constructed appears designed to create foundation for formal allegations regarding banking privacy practices, potentially seeking both personal leverage and institutional pressure simultaneously. Her assessment aligns with my own growing recognition of Robert's likely strategy, not merely retaliatory emotion but calculated escalation designed to create maximum leverage through multiple pressure points. The approach reveals both sophistication and fundamental misunderstanding, correctly identifying potential vulnerability areas, but significantly underestimating institutional response capacity and professional credibility reserves. By 9:30 a.m., comprehensive response strategy has been finalized, anticipatory statements prepared for various potential publication approaches, background materials assembled for contextual support if needed. The coordinated effort represents institutional commitment to reputation defense extending beyond individual protection to organizational credibility preservation. As the strategy session concludes, Catherine requests private consultation, her expression suggesting additional developments beyond the immediate media response situation. Once seated in my office with appropriate privacy assured, she presents new information requiring consideration. Jessica Matthews contacted my office directly this morning, she explains, presenting printed email documentation. She's offering comprehensive evidence regarding both financial transactions and communication planning in exchange for consideration during potential litigation implications. Her attorney suggests she's increasingly concerned about personal liability exposure as Robert's strategies escalate. The development confirms earlier assessment regarding Jessica's motivations while creating new strategic considerations. Potential cooperation from someone with direct access to Robert's planning creates significant informational advantages, but also introduces complicated ethical and tactical questions regarding appropriate engagement parameters. What specifically is she offering? I ask. Professional assessment temporarily superseding emotional reaction to this unexpected development. Text message documentation regarding planned media strategy, including specific targeting approaches for both personal and institutional reputation. Financial records showing her own account activities correlated with disputed transactions. recorded conversations where future planning was discussed, apparently without her initially realizing the potential legal implications of her participation. The potential evidence value appears substantial, particularly regarding premeditated reputation damage attempts that might support both restraining order extension and potential defamation counterclaims if media publication proceeds as anticipated. However, direct engagement with Jessica creates obvious complications given her role in the underlying relationship dissolution. What parameters would govern potential information exchange? I ask, considering both practical and ethical dimensions simultaneously. Her attorney proposes one-way information provision through legal counsel with no direct contact between parties. No specific commitments regarding future litigation positions, but documented acknowledgement of cooperation for potential reference during any proceedings where her actions might otherwise create liability exposure. The structured approach addresses primary practical concerns while maintaining appropriate separation between directly involved parties. Still, accepting information from someone who participated in relationship deception creates uncomfortable, ethical complexity regardless of potential strategic value. What's your recommendation regarding this development? I ask, recognizing Catherine's experience with similar situations provides valuable perspective beyond my own limited dissolution process familiarity. From strictly strategic perspective, the information potentially provides significant advantage, particularly regarding premeditation evidence that strengthens both restraining order justification and potential defamation claims. However, emotional complications should not be underestimated regardless of procedural separation maintained through legal intermediaries. The balanced assessment acknowledges both practical benefits and potential emotional costs, recognizing that strategic advantage and psychological impact require separate evaluation rather than combined assessment. Professional training suggests accepting valuable intelligence regardless of source complications. Personal instinct resists engagement with someone who participated in betrayal regardless of current cooperation motivation. Let me consider the approach parameters while we address the immediate media response situation, I decide, unwilling to make significant strategic decisions under time pressure when emotional implications require careful consideration. The information potentially provides valuable insight, but engagement framework needs thorough evaluation before commitment. Catherine accepts this measured response without pressing for immediate decision, her experience likely confirming that major strategic choices during dissolution proceedings benefit from careful consideration rather than reactive determination. The media response remains priority focus given publication timeline implications, with Jessica's potential cooperation representing secondary strategic consideration for subsequent attention. The remainder of the morning focuses on finalizing media response details, coordinating messaging across institutional departments, and preparing contingency approaches for various potential publication angles. By noon, when the reporter's response deadline arrives, comprehensive strategy implementation has been completed with appropriate documentation for potential regulatory review if subsequent escalation occurs as anticipated. The waiting period between response provision and potential publication creates unusual suspension. Preparation completed, but outcome yet undetermined. Strategic positioning established, but effectiveness unmeasured. This litigation limbo represents another dissolution process, characteristic requiring adaptation. Periods of intense activity followed by extended uncertainty while opposing strategies develop and deploy. Catherine's update arrives mid-afternoon. The Financial Times has decided to delay publication pending additional fact verification, likely indicating our response created sufficient doubt regarding allegation credibility to warrant further investigation before proceeding. The development represents initial strategic success, but not conclusive resolution. Publication delay rather than definitive cancellation. This temporary reprieve provides opportunity for addressing the Jessica cooperation question with appropriate thoughtfulness rather than crisis-driven reaction. After careful consideration of both strategic advantages and emotional implications, I authorize Catherine to establish information exchange parameters through appropriate legal intermediaries, with specific limitations regarding engagement scope and future consideration expectations. The decision reflects professional assessment overriding personal reluctance, valuable intelligence accepted despite uncomfortable source association, strategic advantage prioritized over emotional reaction. The approach mirrors divorce proceedings themselves, practical resolution requiring emotional compartmentalization, effective outcomes sometimes necessitating uncomfortable engagement parameters. As evening approaches, bringing conclusion to this intensely challenging day, I find myself contemplating the strange intersection of professional and personal domains now characterizing my daily experience. Banking security expertise now deployed toward personal reputation defense. Risk assessment frameworks applied to relationship dissolution strategy. Institutional crisis management approaches utilized for navigating individual life disruption. The professional competence Robert consistently underestimated now provides essential structure for navigating the dissolution he never anticipated. Perhaps the most significant irony in this unexpected life recalibration. His dismissal of my capabilities created the very blindness now undermining his strategic effectiveness. Perception limitations becoming tactical vulnerabilities when confronting unanticipated opposition resources. Tomorrow brings continued uncertainty regarding media publication decisions, potential new strategies from opposing counsel, and complicated information assessment from unexpected cooperation sources. Yet tonight, reviewing the day's effective crisis response implementation, I find unexpected confidence regarding capacity to navigate whatever developments emerge. The banking executive remains fully engaged despite personal disruption, professional capabilities deployed effectively across multiple challenging domains simultaneously. Robert's strategic attacks target precisely what he failed to recognize throughout our marriage. The comprehensive competence consistently demonstrated but never acknowledged, now fully deployed toward resolving the dissolution he initiated, but cannot control. 3 months after that fateful confrontation at the bank, I sit in the conference room of Catherine's law office, reviewing the final settlement documents. The mahogany table gleams under carefully positioned lighting. The heavy paper of legal documents crisp under my fingers as I turn each page with deliberate care. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city continues its relentless rhythm, oblivious to the lives being formally disentangled inside this quiet room. Everything appears to be in order, Catherine says, her voice carrying the satisfied tone of someone who has navigated treacherous waters and reached safe harbor with her client intact. Robert's attorney submitted the signed documents this morning. Once you sign, we'll file immediately, and the dissolution will be finalized within 10 business days. I pause on the final page, pen hovering above the signature line. This single signature represents the official conclusion to 8 years of marriage, the legal termination of a relationship that had already ended emotionally long before I discovered the financial betrayal. The moment feels like it should carry more weight, some ceremony or gravity beyond the simple application of ink to paper. Any second thoughts? Catherine asks, misreading my hesitation. No, I reply with certainty, just recognizing the moment. My signature flows across the line with steady precision, the same controlled penmanship that appears on bank executive directives, security protocols, and now, divorce decrees. The juxtaposition isn't lost on me. Congratulations, Catherine says as I complete the final signature. You've navigated one of the most complex divorce scenarios I've handled in recent years with remarkable composure. Complex indeed. After his initial attempts at media manipulation failed, the Financial Times ultimately declining to publish his thinly veiled accusations due to lack of substantiating evidence, Robert had cycled through multiple strategies, with increasing desperation. From threatened regulatory complaints to attempted social sabotage among our mutual acquaintances to one particularly ill-advised confrontation at a charity event where he'd been forcibly removed by security, each maneuver had ultimately strengthened our legal position while diminishing his. Jessica's unexpected cooperation had proven decisive in the final settlement negotiations. Her documented evidence of Robert's premeditated attempts to damage my professional reputation, combined with her testimony about his explicit plans to hide assets during divorce proceedings, had eventually forced his attorney to recommend a settlement rather than risk court exposure. The financial terms are quite favorable, Catherine continues, organizing the signed documents into appropriate folders. Full retention of your separate assets, proportional division of legitimate joint property, and appropriate compensation for the misappropriated funds with interest. The non-disparagement clause has substantial enforcement provisions, and the extended restraining order provides ongoing protection should his behavior deteriorate again. The technical summary captures the practical outcomes but misses the deeper victory, not financial compensation, but the fundamental recognition of truth. Robert's carefully constructed narrative had collapsed under the weight of documented evidence. His attempts to reframe himself as victim thoroughly dismantled by his own documented actions and intentions. What happens now? I ask, though I already know the procedural answer. The question seeks something beyond legal process, some guidance for navigating the unfamiliar territory of life reconstructed after unexpected demolition. Catherine understands the underlying question. After 30 years of guiding clients through divorce, she recognizes the transitional moment when legal proceedings conclude, but emotional processing continues. Professionally, you've already managed the situation with remarkable effectiveness, she observes. The bank's board not only supported you throughout, but has since expanded your authority. Your reputation in financial circles appears enhanced rather than damaged by how transparently you handled the situation. This assessment aligns with my own observations. The 3-month temporary reassignment had concluded with my return to security operations carrying additional oversight responsibilities. Thomas had been unexpectedly direct during that transition meeting. Crisis reveals character. Yours has proven exceptional. Personally, Catherine continues with the wisdom of someone who has witnessed hundreds of post-divorce trajectories, give yourself permission to experience this transition without predetermined expectations. Some clients immediately seek new social connections. Others value solitude for reflection. Some find professional immersion helpful. Others benefit from temporary distance through travel or creative pursuits. There's no universal roadmap. Her perspective echoes conversations with my therapist, Dr. Winters, who has helped navigate the emotional complexities that legal proceedings address only tangentially. Weekly sessions have provided structured space for processing the grief, anger, and ultimately unexpected relief that accompanied the dissolution process. I've been considering a temporary change of scenery, I admit, sharing a decision reached just days ago. The bank has an executive exchange program with our European partners. 3 months in the London office has been offered, overseeing implementation of security protocols we developed here. The opportunity represents perfect synchronicity of professional advancement and personal transition, responsible distance, rather than impulsive escape, continued meaningful work within a fresh environment, connection with colleagues without the weight of witnessing my private life's public dissolution. Sounds ideal, Catherine approves. Professional continuity with environmental refresh. When would you begin? 2 weeks, I reply. Enough time to ensure smooth operational transition here, but soon enough to create clear delineation between ending one chapter and beginning another. As we conclude our final meeting and I prepare to leave Catherine's office, she offers a parting observation that captures something essential about the journey from discovery to resolution. You know, she says thoughtfully, in many cases like yours, the greatest damage comes not from the betrayal itself, but from the shattered self-perception that follows, the questioning of one's own judgment, the erosion of confidence in decision-making, ability. You've avoided that particular wound. Her observation resonates with unexpected clarity. Throughout this process, from the first discovered financial deception through each strategic response to dissolution challenges, my professional capabilities provided foundation for personal navigation. The skills Robert consistently underestimated became the very tools that enabled effective response to his betrayal. Financial security expertise proves surprisingly transferable to personal security requirements. I reply with a small smile. Risk assessment is risk assessment, whether analyzing transaction patterns or relationship deception indicators. Catherine returns the smile with genuine warmth. Keep that perspective. It will serve you well in whatever comes next. Outside, the building's spring sunshine creates dancing patterns through new leaves on the plaza trees. I pause before heading to my car, taking a moment to fully absorb this transitional milestone. The divorce process that began with devastating discovery concludes not with corresponding devastation, but with unexpected liberation. Freedom from pretense, from continuous underestimation, from calibrating achievements to accommodate another's insecurity. My phone vibrates with an incoming message, not Robert testing boundaries again. His communication attempts ceased completely after Jessica's testimony made his legal position untenable. Instead, the notification shows Diane's name. Celebration dinner tonight? That little Italian place on 7th has a corner table with our names on it. The invitation represents another aspect of post-dissolution recalibration. Friendships deepened through crisis support. Professional relationships expanded to include personal dimensions. New social connections established without relationship filtering. The dinner will likely include Sarah as well, her initial emergency accommodation having evolved into regular wine nights and occasional weekend hiking excursions. Absolutely, I respond. 7:30? I'm bringing the ridiculous, expensive champagne. This situation deserves. 1 week later, I stand in my home, truly mine now in both legal deed and emotional reality, supervising the temporary storage of select furniture and personal items before my London assignment. The house feels different with certain pieces removed, spaces opened for future possibilities, rather than preserved in relationship configuration. The doorbell interrupts my inventory assessment. The security system shows Thomas's wife, Claire, on the front step, unexpected but not unwelcome. Though technically my superior's spouse, she's become something of a mentor during recent months. 20 years my senior with experience navigating banking leadership positions during her own career before retirement. I hope I'm not intruding, she says when I open the door. Thomas mentioned you're leaving for London soon and I wanted to drop off something before you go. Not intruding at all, I assure her, genuinely pleased by the visit. I could use a break from inventory decisions. Coffee? In the kitchen, recently remodeled to my preferences after years of accommodating Robert's aesthetic priorities, Claire explains her unannounced visit while I prepare espresso. When I took my first international assignment after my divorce, she begins without preamble. A colleague gave me something that proved unexpectedly valuable. I thought you might find it similarly useful. She places a small leather-bound journal on the counter between us. Its cover shows subtle signs of age and handling, not damage but the patina of an object carried through significant experiences. It's a transition journal, she explains. Not for recording what happens each day, but for documenting what you discover about yourself when everything familiar has been removed. New environment, new colleagues, new daily patterns. They create unique opportunity for self-rediscovery after relationship dissolution. She opens the journal to show intermittent entries rather than daily documentation. No pressure to write regularly. Just capture moments of realization as they occur. Preferences you'd forgotten you had, boundaries you no longer need to maintain, aspirations temporarily set aside that might now be re-examined. The gift represents exactly the type of thoughtful practicality I've come to appreciate from Claire. Not sentimental placation, but useful tools for navigating genuine challenges, offered from personal experience rather than theoretical supposition. This is perfect, I tell her, genuinely moved by the gesture's meaning beyond its material value. Thank you for thinking of it. Experience shouldn't be wasted, she replies simply. Particularly the difficult kind. As Claire leaves and I return to inventory management, the journal remains on the kitchen counter, a tangible reminder that this transition, while uniquely mine in specific details, follows patterns others have successfully navigated before. There's strange comfort in that continuity. The recognition that personal upheaval occurs within larger human experience patterns rather than isolated individual chaos. 3 days before my departure for London, I complete one final professional obligation. A comprehensive security briefing for the executive team regarding protocol updates implemented during my main role restoration. The presentation represents both professional continuity and personal milestone. My first formal board presentation since the divorce finalization made headlines in banking circles. The boardroom feels familiar yet different. Identical in physical configuration, but transformed through changed personal context. These same executives had received briefing about my temporary reassignment during marital crisis. Now they receive security protocol updates from someone whose professional credentials have been tested and validated through personal challenge. The protocol adjustments incorporate lessons from recent unusual transaction pattern identification, I explain, the carefully neutral phrasing acknowledging the connection to my personal situation without inappropriate specificity. Particularly, regarding differentiation between legitimate anomalies and potential fraudulent activity indicators. Thomas catches my eye briefly during this section, his slight nod acknowledging the masterful professional integration of personally acquired insights. The experience that could have proved professionally damaging has instead been transformed into institutional knowledge improvement, personal challenge converted to organizational advancement. The presentation concludes with expected efficiency, technical questions addressed with appropriate precision, implementation timeline confirmed without unnecessary elaboration. As executives gather materials and prepare to depart, several offer brief but meaningful acknowledgments of my London assignment, professional congratulations without intrusive personal references, the perfect calibration of collegial recognition. A moment, if you have time, Thomas requests as others exit, indicating he'd like a private word. When the boardroom has emptied, he offers something unexpected, not additional leadership guidance or assignment parameters, but personal perspective, rarely shared in professional context. Years ago, he begins, before becoming president here, I experienced something similar to your recent situation. Different specific circumstances, but similar fundamental betrayal by someone whose perception of me never aligned with reality. The revelation surprises me, not the experience itself, which seems unfortunately common across many lives, but his willingness to acknowledge personal vulnerability within professional context. Throughout my banking career, Thomas has embodied the separation between professional and personal domains, his private life remaining largely abstract to even long-term colleagues. The professional impact eventually proved positive, he continues, though that perspective came only with considerable distance. The experience fundamentally changed how I evaluate character, both in others and in myself. Those assessment changes have informed every significant decision since, particularly regarding who receives my trust in both business and personal matters. The insight offers a longer view than currently available from my perspective. How present disruption potentially shapes future judgment in ways that become apparent only through subsequent experience. The pattern recognition feels professionally relevant despite its personal application. I appreciate you sharing that perspective. I respond, understanding the value of his rare disclosure. It's helpful to consider longer-term integration possibilities beyond immediate transition management. The London assignment provides ideal context for that integration process, he observes. Familiar professional application with novel, environmental factors. We expect your return with both security protocols and personal perspective enhanced through international implementation experience. His deliberate acknowledgement of both professional and personal development dimensions reflects unusual emotional intelligence within executive leadership contexts, recognition that human experience inevitably informs professional function regardless of attempted compartmentalization. The night before my London departure, I complete one final personal obligation: dinner with Diana at her lakeside home, the first extended in-person conversation since her initial message after Robert's financial deception discovery. Our communication has continued through brief messages and occasional calls, but distance seemed appropriate during active divorce proceedings given her relationship to both parties involved. The house looks beautiful, I observe as she welcomes me into the waterfront property she maintained following her own divorce 15 years earlier. The restoration project turned out perfectly. The home's extensive renovation had featured prominently in our earlier friendship. Her architectural background expressed through careful historical preservation combined with modern functionality improvement. The project had represented her own post-divorce reclamation, physical space transformed to reflect individual identity rather than relationship compromise. Projects with clear beginning and end provide excellent transition framework, she observes as we settle on the deck overlooking the water, wine glasses in hand. Tangible progress markers during otherwise ambiguous emotional territory. Her perspective perfectly captures something I've noticed during recent months: how completing defined tasks provides anchor points during identity recalibration. Concrete achievements balancing abstract personal reformation processes. How's Sean handling everything? I ask, referring to her 27-year-old son, whose relationship with Robert had complicated our friendship navigation during divorce proceedings. Though technically Robert's friend through university connections, rather than family association, the relationship had created unavoidable loyalty complexities. Better than expected, Diana replies with characteristic directness. The financial manipulation created clear moral territory even when friendship suggested divided loyalties. Some relationships don't survive that clarification process, but those that do often emerge strengthened through honest reassessment. Her observation applies beyond Sean's specific situation, capturing essential truth about how crisis forces relationship authenticity evaluation. Connections either strengthening through genuine support or dissolving through revealed incompatibility, or convenience foundation. Robert reached out to him recently, she continues, watching my reaction carefully. Attempted some narrative reconstruction about misunderstood intentions and excessive consequences. This information creates no particular emotional response, just clinical interest in Robert's continued reputation management attempts through any available channels. The emotional detachment itself represents significant healing indicator, his actions now generating strategic assessment rather than personal distress. Sean shut it down immediately, Diana adds. Said something about not being interested in alternative facts when bank records tell clear stories. That engineering mind never did appreciate creative interpretation of numerical evidence. The comment prompts genuine laughter, the first spontaneous joy expressed about anything tangentially related to divorce proceedings. The sound seems to surprise us both, hanging in the evening air as unexpected evidence of genuine recovery progress. I've missed this, Diana says after a moment, gesturing between us. Actual conversation rather than careful topic navigation. One of divorce's collateral casualties. Friendships temporarily constrained by loyalty perception concerns. London should help accelerate that normalization process, I observe. International assignment creates narrative focus beyond divorce identity. People eventually tire of dissolution drama without new developments to sustain interest. Speaking of London, Diana transitions, reaching beside her chair to retrieve a small package. I brought something for your travels. Nothing extravagant, just practically useful. The carefully wrapped package contains a compact leather travel portfolio, streamlined yet elegant, clearly selected with attention to both function and aesthetic. Its interior reveals thoughtful organization compartments for passport, currency, travel documents, and writing instruments, the leather quality suggesting durability through extensive use. For documenting your rediscovery journey, she explains, both professional insights and personal observations. Sometimes external transition facilitates internal clarification, new surroundings highlighting personal constants previously obscured by familiar contexts. The gift's practical elegance perfectly reflects our friendship foundation, genuine support expressed through thoughtful utility rather than empty sentiment. Like Claire's journal, the portfolio represents experienced insight translated into tangible assistance, personal challenges navigated converted to guidance for others encountering similar territory. As evening concludes and we say temporary goodbyes until my return from London, Diana offers one final observation that captures essential truth about the journey from betrayal discovery to post-dissolution reconstruction. You know, she says, as we stand in her doorway, the greatest revenge against someone who consistently underestimated you isn't proving them wrong publicly, though that certainly happened in spectacular fashion. It's continuing to expand into spaces they could never imagine you occupying, developing capabilities they lacked framework to recognize. Her perspective crystallizes something important about healthy forward movement, focus directed toward personal possibility expansion rather than relationship postmortem continuation, energy invested in capability development rather than vindication demonstration. On departure day, my carefully selected luggage waits by the door. 3 months of necessities distilled into efficient minimum, professional requirements balanced with personal comfort considerations. The house has been prepared for extended absence. Systems checked, services temporarily suspended, security protocols enhanced, plants relocated to Sarah's sunroom for appropriate care. The London assignment represents perfect transition architecture, meaningful professional contribution within novel context, established competence application with fresh environmental variables, sufficient distance for perspective development, without purposeless escape impression. The temporary relocation provides structured framework for unstructured personal recalibration, a defined container for undefined emotional processing. As the car arrives to transport me to the airport, I take one final walk through the house. Not from emotional attachment concern, but practical verification of departure preparations. Each room appears prepared yet expectant, temporarily suspended yet poised for eventual reactivation with potentially different configuration upon return. The kitchen, renovated to my preferences with professional-grade equipment, Robert had deemed unnecessarily elaborate for someone with my limited culinary experience. The home office, rearranged for functional efficiency rather than designed. Impression, awards and credentials now displayed without concern for overshadowing another's achievements. The bedroom, simplified to reflect personal aesthetic priorities rather than relationship compromise. Light now entering freely through window treatment selected for view enhancement rather than privacy preservation. Each space now represents authentic self-expression without accommodation contortion. Physical environment aligned with internal reality rather than relationship negotiation. The house has been reclaimed alongside professional identity and personal narrative, external manifestation of internal recalibration following betrayal discovery and dissolution navigation. As I lock the door and move toward the waiting car, no dramatic emotional response accompanies this departure. No cinematic moment of tearful release or symbolic gesture of closure performance. Instead, quiet confidence characterizes this transition. Initiation, certainty that professional capability remains intact, personal resilience has proven sufficient, and future possibilities extend beyond current visualization capacity. The banking executive Robert consistently underestimated now travels toward expanded professional application and personal rediscovery simultaneously. The financial security expert, whose capabilities he dismissed as clerical processing, now implements institutional protection protocols internationally. The woman whose ambitions he characterized as adorable hobby interests now navigates global banking partnership implementation with recognized authority. His greatest mistake wasn't the financial betrayal that initiated dissolution proceedings, nor the relationship deception that damaged trust beyond repair. His fundamental error was failure to recognize the extraordinary capability standing before him daily, the intelligence, competence, and strategic thinking he dismissed through assumptions never bothered to verify. As the car pulls away from the house toward airport departure, my thoughts turn not backward toward relationship post-mortem, but forward toward professional application and personal exploration awaiting in London. The betrayal that initiated this journey no longer defines its continuation, just one significant event within broader life trajectory rather than defining narrative framework. The banking director, whose account monitoring capabilities Robert never bothered to comprehend, now travels toward experiences he cannot imagine, developing potential he failed to recognize, occupying spaces his perception limitations prevented him from even acknowledging existed. His underestimation ultimately constrained only his own possibilities, not mine, perhaps the most important realization this entire journey has provided. London awaits with professional challenges and personal discoveries not yet specified but certainly available. The transition journal rests in my carry-on bag, empty pages ready to document insights that emerge when familiar context no longer constrains self-perception. The travel portfolio contains documents enabling movement beyond previous boundaries, both geographical and psychological. Whatever comes next represents not relationship aftermath, but authentic possibility engagement, professional capability application without strategic diminishment, personal preference expression without accommodation, distortion, future possibility exploration without perception limitation. The journey continues not as divorce recovery process, but as genuine self-actualization progression, the banking director fully embracing both professional authority and personal agency simultaneously. His mistake, my future. Our accounts have been permanently balanced. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.